at these various aspects of aging. So there's the clinical aspects of aging, like the disease. There's also the genetics of aging and genetics of disease, environmental characteristics. There's huge systems and data pieces involved with examining aging. Various ethical issues and environmental issues. All of those are important areas of research that are going on in studying human aging, and that we're going to be able to look at also as we look at 100,000 plus or more dogs. If you think about aging, aging is essentially a function of biology and environment. If you think about the ways in which different people that you have seen over your life have aged, they age very, very differently from one another. They get different ages, they get different diseases, and look very different over time. And that is essentially a function of their biology and their environment. So what the Dog Aging Project studies goal is to understand how biology and environment affect aging in dogs in order to better understand how they affect aging in humans. And I've got some pictures here of the matriarch of our family here, Ela. You've got a picture of her as a little baby, then one as her, her in her kind of physical prime. And then later as a 12, 13-year-old dog, I remember when I took this picture, the younger dogs were running around her in circles, and she was just kind of sitting around there watching. And I remember thinking, she's starting to show her age. And watching her do that and watching her acquire various age-related illnesses, I've learned a lot from just being able to watch how my dogs age. So in the Dog Aging Project, that's exactly what we're going to be doing. We're going to be looking at biology and the various aspects of biology and environment and examining the influence of them on aging. So we'll be looking all of these different aspects, for example, of biology, dog behavior, which is fairly innate, intestinal and tissue chemistry, as well as the environment. We're going to be looking at air and water qualities, green space, exercise, social interactions, you name it, and examining how they influence the outcomes, such as lifespan, the length of time that dogs live, their mobility and the mobility changes that occur over the course of aging and frailty, how their behavior and cognition seems to change, as well as what age-related diseases they seem to develop. We're going to be doing this obviously, we're going to be collecting a large amount of data. The first step with that is going to be survey data. Currently, we have 28,000 dogs who have filled out our baseline survey, and that number is growing every day. I think actually as of, I had written this and it was 28,000, but as of last week, we were at well over 29,000. A small subset of those we're going to be also collecting basic DNA on, as well as veterinary medical records and analyzing that. A smaller subset of that will be doing some very in-depth tissue and blood chemistry on an annual basis, as well as having the dogs wear activity monitors so that we're actually going to be able to measure exactly how active these animals are for periods of time. And then another smaller group is our intervention group, which is a group of dogs that will be enrolled in a clinical trial of rapamycin, which has shown some promise in terms of extending health and lifespan in some animals. What I want everyone to think about sort of as I talk about the rest of the study, though, is that, and I'm sorry, we're also going to be doing a study of some of the larger and some more in-depth examination of some of the older dogs that end up responding to the survey and seeing what characteristics may be unique to some of the dogs that live to be 18, 19, 20 years old. But what I want everybody to think about too is that this survey data essentially is the focus for what we hope to be many more future studies. This is really just the very beginning of this project, and we're expecting that many more researchers will be attracted to it, as will much more research funding. So we really see this as us building the foundation for many, many more years of lots of research on various aspects of canine aging. So the first step with the dog aging project is a very detailed survey. Once an owner nominates their dog and decides to participate in the project, they're asked to complete what we call the Health and Life Experience Survey. And this is a very detailed survey that asks about every aspect of the dog's life. Canine demographics, and this goes, this is age, sex, all sorts of birth information, where the dog has lived all of its life, where it was acquired, how it was acquired, and reproductive information, reproductive history, pretty much everything about the background of that dog. We ask about the dog's physical activity, how active they are, where they are active, in what type of temperature they are active. Are they inside, outdoors? How active, when they're outdoors, how warm is it outdoors? When they're indoors, do they sleep? Where do they sleep? Do they spend time in crates? How many hours per day do they sleep? Where do they sleep? Do they sleep in the bedroom? Do they sleep in a crate? Where do they spend their time during the day? All sorts of information about their activity. There is a behavior survey that is actually a standardized instrument that we also administer. We ask about the environment. Does the dog live on carpet? What type of floors does the house have? What type of heating source does the house have? Is there any known asbestos? You name it. Does the dog have access to stairs? If you name it, if we've thought of it, it's in the environment portion of the survey. We ask about the different medications and supplements the dog is on. What type of diet they're fed, and that goes beyond food. We ask about supplements, all sorts of treats, and what types of treats they're fed, whether that treat is fed frequently or infrequently. And a very detailed health history survey, which asks about pretty much whether or not the dog has been diagnosed with pretty much every canine illness known. And finally, some brief background information on just the owner and their demographic situation. And that's primarily to get an idea about the profile of the participants that we have attracted to the study. We're very committed to the study representing the general dog owning public and want to make sure that we're not just looking at a subset of them. So all in all, this comes down to 4,973 questions. I will say that not every person is asked all of those questions because so many things could happen within the survey. Like, for example, if you've never lived at a second home, you're not going to be asked the 50 questions about your second home. So a lot of these questions are not answered by or even seen by most participants, but that's how many were actually put into making sure that we had as complete a picture as possible about the way in which a dog could live. I'm just going to show you a few of the initial results from the first number of subjects that we had. I think this number was through the end of 2020. The population is roughly half purebred and half mixed breed, which from what we know about research, or from the research that's been done, that tends to be considered and accepted to be the general spread of what the dog population in the United States looks like. Our current research population seems to be mostly in the adult phase. We have very few puppies, which may be a reflection of COVID, and it may also be a reflection of just who we have not managed to reach yet. That's going to be a focus of our ongoing recruitment, as I'll address later. The majority of our dogs in the study are spayed or neutered. And you can see here that most of them tend to chase squirrels and rabbits. And these are just kind of examples of some of the data that we're collecting. This is what the heating sources of the homes the dogs live in. Most are natural gas, but some are heated solely by wood. We can see what their diet looks like. Majority being fed dry and dry kibble, and those twice.
Sandy, let me ask you a question.
Yeah.
When an individual registers with the project, we had a question that came up. Registers with the project, what questions are they supposed to be answering? What surveys are they presented?
Okay, so what will happen is when you nominate a dog and go through the consent process for the study, all of the different surveys that I just outlined. Let me go back here. You will be asked to complete this health and life experience survey, and that consists of 10 mini surveys within this. And I think this is 8 of them. There's another one. There's another couple that have more to do with the owner background or the owner history. But there's 10 subsets, but they all make up the health and life experience survey. I know what one of them is about other surveys that you may be interested in. That's the one that I'm missing. So all of these different are different like mini surveys within the entire HLES. Does that make sense and answer the question?
I'm not. I can mention from my own experience that there was a series of surveys that had to be completed. These are not separate categories, but they are all combined in one or more of those aspects. Lisa, perhaps you want to unmute yourself and just ask that particular question.
Yeah, well, I don't think I got all of the surveys. I tried to sign up both of my dogs, one who's 9 years old, one who's 9 months old, and I don't think I got all of the surveys.
Did you? Were you asked to complete? Did you go through the consent process?
I think so. I'm not sure. I mean, I must have done something right because I'm on here. But like I said, I have a 9-year-old dog and a 9-month-old dog, and I tried to sign them both up, but the only response I got was for my 9-month-old dog. So I'm not really sure.
I'll get to that. I'll get to the issue about which dog can be about. We're only allowing 1 dog per household, and I can explain that later.
Okay. But you're talking about some things that I never saw. Okay.
So what should happen is after you sign up and nominate your dog, you'll go. The project will respond to you. You will consent to be in the study, which is another longer process, and you'll be invited to complete create kind of what we call your own personal portal. And that portal is where you will receive the majority of the information about the dog aging project as it relates to your dog, including which surveys we would like for you to complete. The Health and Life Experience Survey is the first survey, the first major survey that you will be asked to complete, and it consists of all of these components.
Okay, I'm just a little confused, but okay.
So I think my response to you is that if you're not sure if you've gotten this far, I'm going to ask you to contact me separately, and we will find out. I can put you in touch with folks who can find out that for you. Okay?
Okay.
Great. We've gotten through all of this. Okay. So I mentioned that we asked pretty much about every major health issue that your dog may have experienced, and you can see that this is sort of the frequency of what our dogs have had. The most frequent being skin disorders, and the least frequent being blood-related diseases. And I'm just kind of giving you an idea as to what this data looks like. For example, if we look at the different trauma related issues that dogs have experienced, this is what those look like. So most of those, it's a bite wound from a dog. But others have been hit by cars or, more rare traumatic types of events. This is where I want to say that this seems like a huge amount of data, and I know that John actually mentioned it to me when he first asked me to come on and talk. This is an incredible amount of data, and this is only the survey data. We haven't even gotten into some of the more the blood work or some of the tissue-related stuff and the activity data that's going to be coming along, let alone the fact that this is a longitudinal study, and this data will be updated annually. And a lot of people are like, what are you going to do with all of that data? And that's where I say that we have this amazing research team. It consists of veterinarians, statisticians, communication specialists, programmers, epidemiologists, geneticists, you name it. They are hard at work with this at this project. We come from a huge number of universities across the country, and although we didn't expect to be working on Zoom 100% all year for the last year, we've been doing it very effectively and working from the outset because of the way in which this project has been structured. We actually were pretty accustomed to Zoom before COVID ever came into existence. So the next steps on the project. We're in our first, the analysis of our first year of data, and I think we're still in the infancy stages of that, but by the end of the year, I think you'll be starting to hear some of the publications that are coming out and some of our first research findings. We're also starting to take up new recruitment strategies because, believe it or not, we need more dogs. As I mentioned when I was showing you some of the characteristics of the dogs in the current study, we're realizing that we really want to try to target larger numbers of purebred dogs. They're super valuable for a number of reasons. First, they allow for the study of characteristics unique to the breed. But they also, when we look at specific purebred groups, those purebred dogs have a known ancestry and a real defined genetic background. And that really allows, when you narrow that, it allows the researchers to more easily identify environmental and lifestyle factors as opposed to more random genetic factors that influence health. Also, significant numbers of a specific breed in the program makes it possible for us to look at different disease risk factors and patterns within that breed. And also for those of us who are breed fanciers, I think we all have a fair amount of interest in future in-depth breed-specific research, which can ultimately only help us understand better how to improve our breed's health and longevity. But also, purebred dogs also have other really valuable characteristics. One is that they're intentionally bred. But also these dogs are used for breeding. And dogs who are used for breeding experience very different biological processes, over the course of their lifetime. It gives us the ability to study dogs that are kept intact and the influence of the reproductive system. And if you remember back in one of the previous slides that I showed you, unfortunately, the majority of our current population of dogs in the study are spayed or neutered. And that, although some may have been spayed or neutered late, it's more likely that this reflects that the majority of the pet population in the United States is spayed and neutered, which is a good thing. There's a reason that we encourage people to spay and neuter their dogs. But at the same time, it doesn't allow us to look at really how the reproductive system may influence aging. And I don't know about all of you, but I, over the past few years, have increasingly seen especially on social media, various claims about how various diseases may be at lower frequencies for dogs that are kept intact for longer periods of time. And there's a lot of good reasons that are given in those, but they're much more, they tend to be more academic types of articles as opposed to research focused and results focused research. And actually, if you look at veterinary research, the majority of veterinary research shows that intact animals tend to have shorter lifespans by about a year than spayed neutered dogs. I think that there's probably reasons for that that have to do with that particular research design and study, and it may not have anything to do with reproductive status so much as which dogs were studied and for what reasons. But we don't know that. Whereas if we're able to get larger, especially significantly larger numbers of dogs and do this type of comparison from the outset, I think we're really going to be able to get a much clearer understanding of the role of the reproductive system. Also, reproductive dogs, purebred dogs, tend to be dogs that engage in specific activities. You're less likely, I mean, at the beginning of this call, I was hearing all of you talk about the different things that you're doing with your dogs, you know, whether it be herding or nose work. And you're less likely to see that in your average pet owning population. And it's of definite interest to see how these more active animals age differently. So it sounds to me like I have a lot of different breed-owned people on this call, but I just did want to present real briefly the numbers of Belgian Turbs that are in the project, just as a kind of example as to why we would love to increase numbers. If you look at our subset of dogs who are purebred, it's no real surprise that the larger numbers are going to be the Labrador Retrievers and the German Shepherds, and that by far fewer, we're going to be seeing that fewer than 1% are Belgian Turbs. But we also see that it's only 32 dogs. So it's really, although every single one of those 32 dogs are providing valuable information, if we can increase those numbers, we can really start to say more about the breed. 32 is not a huge number to really be able to come to conclusions about aging and health-related patterns within that breed. And for us to know whether or not targeting larger numbers of specific breeds is possible, AKC's provided me with what's called complement data. And this isn't registration data because, as you all know, not everybody registers their purebred dogs. And many breeds actually, registration it's just not a common thing. However, when any breeder has a litter of puppies and they say to AKC, okay, I have 9 puppies, I need registration papers and paperwork for 9 puppies, even if only 3 of those owners end up sending in their papers, AKC knows that 9 puppies were born, and 9 puppies were considered, they were viable enough that at some point their breeder assumed that they were going to be going home with puppies or with people. And so here's what that data tends to look like. Again, the Belgians are, far lower frequency, but I know that in 2018, at least 573 Belgian Turbs were born, and that's just in 2018. So I know that there are at least 573 2-year-old Belgians, and that's just 2-year-olds. So if we think about the entire lifespan, I'm assuming that there's, many more out there. So I know that we can target many more of those. So how can you help? The first is nominate one of your dogs. And I focused a bit on purebred dogs here towards the end, but really all dogs. We are just, for the reasons I've listed, trying to focus on increasing some of our purebred numbers. If you have multiple dogs, for a number of reasons, we are only allowing 1 dog at a time per household. The main reason for this is that when it comes to the actual data analysis, it's very hard to account for few dogs being owned and living in the same environment for one another. So their environment is going to probably have a significant influence on their age, but there's only 2 or 3 of them. So it's not enough to tell us how that specific environment may have influenced how those dogs age differently from one another. Whereas if we're able to get one dog, for example, from every owned, let's say there's a litter of 9 puppies and those 9 puppies go to 6 different homes. Maybe the breeder keeps 2 and 2 go to another home. If we're able to get all 6 of those homes participating, then we're able to get a better idea as to what the influence of those different environments look like. The other thing too is just that when you do nominate, and I think actually our previous conversation may be a good example of this, when you do nominate multiple dogs, it gets a little bit confusing as to which one you need to be responding to what about at all times. Whereas if only one is a part of the study at a time, you're always able to sort of track what you've been asked of by us, as well as what information you've provided. If you do have multiple dogs and you're wondering which of your dogs to nominate, again, we want all dogs. So if you've got a preference, I'm not telling you what to do. But if you really don't know what to do, the first idea to consider is dogs that are expected to live their lives with you. Sometimes we keep a dog or have a dog come live a portion of our life and of their lives with us, and we know that that's a significant possibility. That tends to be truer in some breeds than others, but some breeders will keep a dog thinking, okay, after she has a couple of litters, because I've got 7 dogs here, maybe I'd like to send her to go live in a nice pet home and, be spoiled the rest of her life, which is great. I'm not, we're not making any judgment calls on that at all. However, that doesn't then allow us to easily study that dog in its aging, in its later life. Puppies. Puppies are, we have very few of them right now in the study, which really sort of surprised us. So right now we're trying to get some puppies because we really do want to study more dogs from infancy until death. As well as for the reasons I explained, dogs will remain intact for a period of time so that we're able to study how spaying and neutering at various different periods of time influences aging. Other ways you can help: encourage other owners or other breeders to nominate their dogs. Help spread the word within your breed and your breed club if you belong to one, and rescue too. We do require that the owners have a pretty good idea as to how old their dogs are within a few months, certainly within the year. But as long as you know that the dog is purebred, if the rescue is purebred, then it really doesn't matter if it's a rescue versus a dog that was obtained from a breeder. And if you're a breeder, consider offering information about the Dog Aging Project to puppy buyers, your past puppy buyers, your current puppy buyers, or future puppy buyers. We have flyers and brief informational pieces that are appropriate for puppy packs and social media. This is a good example of one of the flyers that we've sent out actually to the Belgian Club. But in addition to that, we have pre-prepared social media posts for you to, feel free to pass on Instagram, Facebook, etc., as well as newsletter articles that are tailored for your breed. Another fun thing that's recently been developed is that we have an online forum for participants. So once you become a participant in the project, it's called the Dog Park. And it kind of reminds me, I don't know how many of you remember the old bulletin boards of the days before Facebook, but it kind of really reminds me of those. And in the forum, there's some basic, project related questions. If you've got questions about the project, or why are we being asked this, or what about this, or we can do podcasts and live video casts on a monthly basis. But also just a fun sort of social forum. Here's a couple of examples of some of the social areas that people are allowed to kind of join and talk about, just introductions, loss and grief for those who are dealing with end-of-life issues. And here's a few examples of posts from the general dog talk section. So they're really pretty, it's pretty fun to see what's come out of this. So everything from, a genetic mutation to various raw feeding questions to a guy who's really happy that he got his dog aging project stickers in the mail. These are some of the cute dog pictures. I'm pretty sure that you can see that Calvin the Aussie, he probably was wearing green on St. Patrick's Day. And then this is actually one of our fellow workers. His dog, not quite sure he wants to get off of the couch. So all sorts of different opportunities for, I think, regardless of the reason you might want to interact with the project, that you could. And anywhere from research interests to social interests. So that's the end of my formal presentation. Thanks so much for having me, but in the meantime, you've got questions, happy to answer those.
Let me start with one of the questions that was asked on the chat line. What do you have a target number of dogs that you are looking for?
Our target number is infinity. So this is currently a 5-year funded study. However, we are applying for a renewal, and we have been told by NIA that we will be getting that renewal. We do need to, perform appropriately and make sure that we're meeting all of our milestones, but that's our expectation. But as many long-term and longitudinal epidemiology studies go for decades. I don't know if any of you are familiar with some of the heart disease studies, like the Jackson Heart Study that's been going for decades. I work on one that was funded for an initial 5-year period 30 years ago. And that's our expectation of what's going to happen with the dog aging project. So our goal, I would say over the next year or so is 100,000 dogs, but really our goal is to provide an ongoing research project that is going to continue to recruit dogs for many, many more years to come, hopefully after I'm long and retired, and that we'll be able to continue to research important issues related to canine aging as well as human aging.
Okay, now I've got a personal question. On the diagnosis list, what is the confidence level that those statistics can be applied to the total universe of dogs?
Okay, let me make sure I'm understanding the question here. So, do you mean that the disease list that I showed,
right,
that can be applied? So essentially what we did when we created the health section of the survey is that we went through every real known dog disease that dogs get. And this, boy, I will tell you that putting that section of the survey together took many veterinarians. It took the Canine Health Foundation and a lot of thought about how to assess these. And I'm sure that there are going to be diseases that were in the other category, but we sure didn't think of those at the outset.
I have a question.
Does that answer your question, John?
Let me follow up. What I meant by that was on that list that you showed us earlier, there was a percentage of dogs in the survey that had I forget the various different categories, but a percentage of dogs in the survey. How appropriate is it to say, to take those percentages and say, that's the percentage of all dogs?
Okay, now I understand. It actually is not appropriate. What we know at this time is that of this population of dogs, 39% of them, for example, I think it was 39% experienced trauma. To say that 39% of all dogs experience trauma would not be an appropriate application. We're not able, because this is a volunteer, I'm interested in the dog aging project, I am going to sign up my dog. It is not necessarily, and I actually can probably quite confidently say it is almost definitely not representative of the entire population of dogs in the United States. It does have some representative characteristics. We do know that approximately half of the dogs in the United States are purebred and half are mixed breed, but I feel quite certain that various aspects of the population are overrepresented. We do know that we have fewer urban dogs than we expected to have. Right now, the population of dog owners is very white and very wealthy. I think that that has to do with the way in which we've marketed the study thus far, and hopefully that will improve over time. But so to answer your question, no, it's not applicable to the entire population of dogs.
Thank you. Nikki has a question.
Yes.
Yeah, my question is, have you your group, the Dog Aging Project group, contacted all breed clubs, like the boards of many different breed clubs? Because this is the first, thank you, John, for doing this, that I've heard of your project. And I think of myself as being kind of aware of dog things. So have you contacted the breed clubs, like the boards of the various breed clubs of breeds you don't have yet, or you'd like to get more of, in order to have them then reach out to their group for you, so you're getting some help along those lines?
Yeah, so that is actually our current, that we're doing a huge drive right now to do exactly that. I think we've reached out to 20 or 30 specific breed clubs, and that's really the focus of our second phase of recruitment is through the breed clubs. So if you have not heard, I'm hopeful that you will in short order, certainly within a year.
I do have a suggestion, or maybe you've already looked into it. Breeders, AKC has a designation called Breeders of Merit. We are that. We're required to have 100% registration. And as a breeder, I would have no problem handing out your flyers and kind of leaning on any prospective buyer to agree to participate. It might be a good idea to contact the AKC and see if about getting hold of those people who are listed as breeders of merit.
That's a really great idea. We've been trying to focus on reaching the breeders through the breed clubs, and I've tried to put a bug in their ear about adding the flyers to their to the registration paperwork. But I really like the idea of getting a hold of the subset of breeders of merit, because you're absolutely right. They're the ones that will be registering the dogs and ensuring that those owners receive this paperwork.
Well, and we also tend to keep in touch with all our dogs. You know, we can tell you not just the day they were born, but pretty much the time they were born on each dog. I mean, we can get very specific on data. So, you know, it's just part of the things we do. There's a lot of things we do as a breeder of merit to for the puppies and for the people that buy our puppies. So it just seems like a natural to me.
Could I say something?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I would say that it's not just AKC, but there's things like ASCA for Australian Shepherds. There's a whole bunch of clubs for different breeds that you might want to reach out to.
Yeah, we've been trying to, as we identify, we're kind of trying to reach out to breeds in various orders having to do with genetic ancestry. Also, we're trying to get some more giant breeds, just because we have very few. But as we kind of have gone through that priority list, we are trying to identify the larger organizations within each breed. And I do know that some are sort of less AKC focused and more other organization focused. So we've been trying to account for that. But thank you, I appreciate that.
Sandy, I have another question.
Yeah.
On this briefly, but I'm curious about the diversity of ownership. What how are you reaching communities of color and non-white communities?
So that is really an ongoing target over the coming couple of years. We were very sort of surprised and dismayed initially to find that our first 27 to 28,000 dog owners, I mean, we love all of them, don't get me wrong, but they were primarily white and they were primarily wealthy. And we know that it's not just white wealthy people that own dogs. And we think that a huge reason for that has to do with the way in which we did do our first sort of marketing about the project. It was through mainstream media. I'm sure that COVID didn't help, but we haven't done any specific outreach to communities of color around dogs, and we're starting to target ways in which we can do that a little bit more efficiently. We want to do so sensitively. But it's definitely a goal that that we're working on actively now.
Another question. Have
Yeah.
you done?
Yeah.
Have you tried? I understand the difficulty of you trying to find your audience this way, because if you're, you know, on a lot of forums, for instance, one does not put or doesn't have to put one's race, so you wouldn't be able to find it that necessarily that way in terms of paperwork. But have you considered advertising in there's such a huge amount of different networks now to run ads for this that would be with networks that might target the audience you're trying to bring in, more of a diverse audience. So I think advertising would be a good thing. And I'm not sure if you'd have to pay for it, if it would come under public service, and you might just be allowed to do it if you contacted the networks.
Yes, and that's what we're trying to do, is sort of develop these networks. But we've also been consulting with a lot of other researchers and social activists within various communities in terms of trying to reach people of color and people of other and more diverse backgrounds.
By networks, I'm talking about television networks. Is that what you're talking about?
I was not talking about television networks. We have.
So I'm talking about not only ABC, NBC, CBS, but I'm talking about BET, OWN, Oprah Winfrey Network. I mean, those are all networks that they're Latino networks. You know, in other words, there are networks that will allow you to get to a diverse audience. And again, because this could be considered public service, you might not have to pay for this. You'd have to check.
Yeah.
But certainly television coverage is what I mean by networks.
Okay. I'm actually writing this down to hand out to my communications communications team that's in charge.
Uh-oh, Nikki, you better watch out. I think she might need a director.
I'm not. I am actually not the director. I tried to.
Nikki has a little bit of knowledge about that particular industry.
Great. That's super helpful to know, actually.
What if you contacted some of the bully rescues?
Yeah, I know that they are contacting specific rescue organizations, but I like specifically that topic. Yeah.
So I have a question, if I may.
I'm sorry, go ahead, Steve.
Yeah. I'm interested in a comment that you made earlier concerning some of the studies that have been going on about the implications of neutered versus unaltered dogs. You're probably familiar with California's AB 702 proposed legislation, and I'm from RBTF, the Redwood Belgian Tervuren guys. We've been responding to that, and the studies that I've been looking at seem to be fairly strong in indicating that unaltered dogs suffer less complications and less disease over time than neutered dogs do. And the ones that show that longevity is influenced have a lot more confounding issues going on. So I'm interested in your view, because one of the propositions we're giving to our assembly people is that you should be able to keep an unaltered dog because there are health implications to it.
So keep in mind, I am not a veterinarian. And so I'm going to sort of give you what I understand to be the current state of research. And that's that the larger, older studies tended to be veterinary clinic-based. And their general finding was that purebred dogs lived on average shorter lifespan by, I believe it was about a year than
Right.
altered dogs. And from my perspective as a dog owner and as a, I think a more how to say it? Like you know, one of the fancy, I think, who understands the dynamics of dog ownership is that the animals who end up in medical settings at the end of their lives who are intact are probably of a different category than those. They may be entering, like, for example, the emergency room because that dog escaped its enclosure chasing after a female who was in heat down the street. In other words, is living in a different situation than I think the group that I suspect that I am appealing to and saying we want your intact animals, especially when I'm talking with breeders and fanciers. So my personal opinion, and it really is an opinion that is not grounded in science, but I think is grounded in some common sense, is that I believe that data is heavily influenced by the setting in which the data was gathered, as opposed to in a larger what we're trying to do here, which is a larger longitudinal study that examines dogs from birth to death and is able to far more objectively account for these different characteristics. The data that has looked at intact animals and their lifespan has not, it's newer as far as I can tell. I know that AKC-CHF has recently actually funded some research that has been able to really provide better guidelines about spay and neuter. And in fact, I believe they just created some breed-specific lists about which breeds may benefit more or less from spay and neuter, and actually how much they benefit. They actually were able to recommend certain ages of spay and neuter by that risk. But my understanding from what I have read is that it's really a newer area, which is why we are trying to recruit as many intact animals so that we can study and add to that as possible.
Do you think, just as a quick follow-up, your representation of unneutered or unaltered dogs is pretty small, 3% and 5%. Is that exactly a sufficient sample size to really? I mean, it may be a very selective 3%, that you're getting.
I don't think so. I don't think so, which is why we are really trying to reach out right now to breed clubs and breeders so that we are able to enlarge those numbers. In fact, I can say that much more strongly. It's not that I don't think so. We know that it's not, and we know we wanted significantly larger numbers of intact animals in the study, and so it's a huge focus right now.
Okay, we're in.
We're getting close to the end of our hour, and there was one area that I thought might take a couple of moments. There is a lot of people who believe that discoveries and the data that you collect on dogs has direct relevance to how humans age and to human conditions. Maybe you could briefly show or mention the direct relevance, the connection between the two. I'm sorry, you were cutting out there. Can I get you to repeat that? Sure. one of the reasons that the NIH funded this survey, this study, is that there are direct correlations between dogs and human conditions, human diseases. We both get cancer, we both get diabetes, we get other types of diseases. Can you perhaps, in the next couple of minutes, just give us a sense as to how this study will have direct relevance to the human condition?
So, and yeah, that's exactly it. I mean, our dogs live in the same environment as us and acquire many of the same diseases. And it's far easier to study a creature that we're able to observe over a 10-year period, and the same things that tend to influence disease and aging. And as we are able to find some of the characteristics that may predict heart disease or cancer, and beyond cancer, there's very specific types of cancer and specific types of tumors. As we're able to identify some of the things that may be associated with those, particularly some of the genetic characteristics, I think we're going to be able to find out whether or not and how some of those may relate to humans. Yeah. So if dogs who live in primarily, I'm just going to make something up, urban settings on community water in the Southwest are more likely to develop cancer A, then do we start seeing the same trends hold true in humans? You know, do we then start looking at their water? You know, or it's more likely going to be other more specific pieces of it, like are there dietary characteristics, or do we end up seeing that a dog was influenced by a certain by large numbers of forest fires in California, for example? How much does the smoke and the different environmental factors that are associated with fires, how much does that influence an animal that we're able to observe over a 10-year period, and whether or not there's trends within that 10-year period? It's going to be far easier to identify those. And then do we start seeing some of the same characteristics pop up in people?
So we all know that people with dogs live longer, but can you assess that in your study?
So we are not currently collecting information about the owner's health. I would not be surprised if in the future we do move in that direction. It's a different level of research in that it at that point becomes what's called human subjects research, which just has different implications. There's definitely interest within the project of doing that, and I do strongly suspect it will happen at some point. But so yeah, it will happen. We're not able to do it within this current project as it is currently funded. I think it will happen. I will say that one of the heart disease studies I work on, my boss and I she also works on the project. We were having so much fun as the dog aging project was being developed that we added to one of our annual heart disease phone call follow-ups, questions about their dog owning history. So we're just in the process now of analyzing that data associated with their health issues. So.
Great. Does anyone have any other questions? If not, I want to thank you so much, Sandy. This was fantastic. I hope that everybody on this call will rush out and register their dog tonight. You don't have to fill in the surveys immediately. It took me a couple of weeks to do all of the surveys. And what's amazing is that when they ask you about the dog's health, my first thought was, I've got to go back and I've got all these records. Your veterinarian has electronic information on all of that, and my vet just uploaded it to the dog project, and I supplemented it with some additional information. So it's real easy to do. You don't have to do it all in one sitting, but the more people who participate, the better it is. And I especially encourage the turf people to do that, because I would sure like to be able to do see some cross tabbing, drill downs on the data. In any
Can't
case,
hear you.
thank you so much, Sandy, for participating. I really appreciate your being here. And if there's any other questions, you can email them to me and I'll forward them on to Sandy. Thank you so much.
Yes. Please feel free to reach out with any questions at all or comments or anything else. I am actually the breed club representative for the project. So if you ended up having specific breed club related questions, I would be the one to address them anyway. So
Terrific. And here's a big hand for our presenter. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
thank you.
Good night now.
Good night.